Star Wars is a good example of a science fantasy franchise where they mix both science fiction and fantasy elements together. Because of this, they don't have to rely upon a strict interpretation of science or to give the facade of being scientific. That's why Star Wars is able to have wizards and magic within it in the form of Jedi and the Force respectively without having to give any kind of rationale or explanation. Just run with it and enjoy. That's why a lot of fans were upset when the idea of midichlorians were introduced. It took away from the science fantasy aspect of the franchise and tried to push it into science fiction.
Greetings and welcome back to Checkpoint Gaming Star Wars Outer Rim. With this episode, we'll be going over game mechanics. When it comes to that of playing the game, even though it centers itself upon scoundrels and mercenaries, it is structured in a way that is fair and civilized. The scum and villainy aspect is just this game's theme, second to it being a Star Wars game. So like The Godfather, criminals and the villains of society can be just as civilized and refined as boardroom scoundrels. Even though the core of Star Wars focuses upon the Force users as a whole, and Jedi in particular, there are those who are interested in knowing its seedier underbelly. With the rules that we used for this series, we pulled from the game's rulebooks, along with the Living Rules reference document, particularly that of version 1.1. If an ability found upon a card contradicts information found within the rulebooks or the Living Rule reference, then the card will take precedence. But if both the card and the rules are able to be followed, then do so. Regardless of the path that the player takes, the game's goal is to become the most famous, or infamous in this case, mercenary found in the galaxy. Before the game begins, players are to agree upon the fame requirement needed to win, with 10 fame being standard. So the game will come to an end once a player obtains this level of renown. But if it's a player's first game, it's recommended to play to 8 fame instead, which allows the players to learn the ropes within a reasonable amount of time. For those that are interested in a longer game, players are to play to 12 fame instead. When it comes to determining a winner, and there are 2 players that gained the required amount of fame, and to do so simultaneously, then the tied player with the most amount of credits is deemed the winner. But if both players are in possession of the same amount of credits, then the tied player who is seated the furthest from the player who started the game in a clockwise direction is deemed the winner. With the obtaining of fame, it can be done in a number of ways, such as completing goals found upon character cards and ship sheets, completing bounties, jobs, and goals, delivering illegal cargo, although in lawless lands is anything truly illegal, winning combat against level 2 and level 3 patrols, and using cards that have been obtained from the luxury market deck. Whenever a player gains fame, they're to advance their fame marker equal to the amount of fame that they obtained. But they can also lose fame as well, which will see the player move their fame marker back equal to the fame that they lost. But if the player is already at 0 fame and they're to lose it, then nothing is to happen. There are also some abilities that will affect the player that is in possession of the most fame, and if multiple players are in possession of the same amount of fame, then they all are considered to be the most famous player. If an ability specifically affects the current player that is in possession of the most fame, it isn't subject to the tie-breaking rules. So if the current player is the most famous player, or they are tied as being the most famous, then they're to be the target of the same ability. Whenever a card possesses the phrase, gain X additional fame, then its fame reward is to be considered part of the fame reward that the card is modifying. Because of this, no new instance of fame is gained, thus causing the player to only gain the amount of fame the base situation allows. And if a player receives an asset that will give them additional fame, then said player is to gain said fame by adjusting their fame marker accordingly. But if the player loses this asset, or they no longer fulfill the conditions that provide the additional fame, then said player is to lose the fame that the asset provided them. Starting with the first player, which was described in the previous episode, and proceeding clockwise, each player is to take their turn, where they are to perform the following 3 steps in order. First, we have the planning step, where the player gets to either move their character, recover from damage, gain credits, or use an ability. Second, we have the action step, where the player can perform any number of actions. And third, we have the encounter step, where the player is able to resolve a single encounter, typically by drawing an encounter card that is from the corresponding deck that is connected with the space they are occupying. Once the player resolves their encounter step, their turn comes to an end and the next player begins theirs. This turn process will continue until one of the players has won the game. It is worth noting that some game effects will cause the player's turn to end early, thus preventing them from resolving any of their given abilities, perform any more of their actions, or to resolve any steps that they're yet to perform. With all of that said, let's take a look at each step in detail. With the planning step, the player is to prepare themselves for action by choosing and then resolving one and only one of the following options. move their character upon the map, recover all damage obtained for both their character and ship, gain 2,000 credits, or use a card's ability where said ability is preceded by the word planning, which is printed in bold. Once resolving the selected option, the player is to proceed to the action step. Regarding the recovering of damage, the player is to discard all of the damage tokens that both their character and ship has sustained during gameplay. But if the player has been defeated during the course of the game, they are required to select the recover damage option, thus preventing them from engaging in any of the other options available with this step. With the movement rules, it sees the player traveling across the outer rim in order for them to accomplish their objectives. If choosing to move, the player will move across the map along the paths up to their given hyperspace value, although they don't have to use all of it. They can even choose not to move at all. And when moving, players can freely move past each other. When it comes to that of moving, they occur when they move to an adjacent space found one space away. These spaces are also connected to one another through the use of paths, which are represented by blue lines. With these spaces, they consist of either a planet, a nav point, or the maelstrom. It is worth noting that two spaces found upon the map are considered adjacent to each other if they are connected by a path that is represented by one of these blue lines. With map tiles, two of them are considered adjacent if they're physically connected to one another. Regarding each stack of patrol tokens, they're found adjacent to the space that is connected to its given endcap by a path, with said adjacent space being the location where new patrols are to be spawned. And with the core world endcaps, they're not adjacent to each other. When it comes to representing each space, planets come with illustrations, nav points consist of yellow circles, and the maelstrom possesses a red icon. Some planets also come with a faction icon, which sees their encounter deck, typically giving the player reputation with its faction, or to obtain a reward if they possess positive reputation with said faction. There are also some abilities that refer to the planet's faction, which is connected to the icon with said space the player is in. But if the player isn't on a planet, or the planet that the player is found upon doesn't have a faction icon, then said space doesn't associate with a faction. When it comes to that of the Ring of Kafrene, although it consists of two large asteroids, it counts as a planet for gameplay purposes. When it comes to that of the Maelstrom, it is a unique point since it comes with some special movement rules. With the Maelstrom, it is a unique point upon the map that will impede player movement, immediately causing it to end and the player's action step to begin. And if an ability allows the player to possess additional movement, or to perform movement outside of their given planning step, they're still unable to move through the Maelstrom. But if a player begins their movement from the Maelstrom, then said player is able to move out of it. When a player is to perform an encounter step while in the Maelstrom encounter will always allow the player to perform an additional turn. But with that said, the player will be unable to gain another turn once they resolve the Maelstrom turn. When it comes to that of patrols, they're able to move through a Maelstrom without having to end their movement there. On top of this, the Maelstrom doesn't count as a nav point for purposes of using abilities. With movement, two elements exist that will prevent a player from moving along their desired path, the Maelstrom and patrols. Since we just discussed the Maelstrom, let's take a look at the patrol tokens. With these patrols, they represent vessels that belong to the various factions which can either help or hinder the players during the course of the game. If a player moves into a space that possesses a patrol token, then they are to stop movement unless said player possesses positive reputation with the patrol's given faction, which allows the player to continue their movement. And like that of the Maelstrom, the player's interrupted movement only occurs when the player moves into their given space, not when the player moves out of it during a subsequent turn. And with the location of patrols, they can be found on a planet, a nav point, or in the Maelstrom. Patrols also don't count as ships for gameplay purposes, and they have the patrol's image found upon both sides of their respective token. There are also a number of abilities and game effects that make reference to a faction's given patrol. With the action step, it sees the player engaging in activities which allows the player to resolve any number of actions they desire, which consists of trade, market, deliver, and resolve an action ability. And with the performing of these actions, they can only be done once per action step. With trade, it sees the player exchange cards with another player who is found in their given space. With market, if the player is located at one of the planets, they will be able to buy a card from a market deck. With deliver, it sees the player drop off cargo and bounty cards at their indicated planet in order to obtain a reward. With the obtaining of cargo and bounties, they're obtained from the market decks, and they can't be obtained from the planet that matches their destination. And if a player obtains cargo or captures a contact during their encounter step, they are unable to deliver it until the player reaches their action step, even if they're already at the destination planet. With the delivering of cargo, the player is to bring it to the planet that is listed upon the card and perform the deliver action in order to obtain the listed reward. From there, the cargo card is to be discarded to the bottom of the respective deck, and if a player possesses multiple cargo cards that can be delivered to the same planet, then said player is able to deliver all of them during the same deliver action, resolving the cargo cards in any order they wish. And when it comes to that of bounties, some additional requirements exist regarding their completion. But if any effect occurs during delivery that results in the ending of the player's turn, then any remaining assets that are yet to be delivered are unable to be delivered. With the delivery of illegal cargo, the player will have to roll a die. If they roll a hit result, then they're able to deliver it without issue. But if they roll any other result, then said player will be forced to resolve databank card number 1. And with resolve and action ability, it is connected with a card ability that has the word action printed in bold before it, with the player resolving the printed ability. Once resolving their final action, the player is to proceed to the encounter step. With most cards, they come with abilities that the players are able to use with each ability, describing when to use it and when their effects are to be resolved. But to resolve an ability, it will have to possess the word action preceding it, with each action only being able to be performed once during a turn. Action abilities also can't interrupt the actions of other abilities, and they can be used before or after the resolution of another ability during the player's turn. When a card ability uses the word cannot, then it is absolute and it cannot be overridden by that of other abilities. If a card ability uses the word may, then its effects are optional. If a card ability uses the word then, it indicates that the player will have to resolve the effects found before the word then before resolving the effects after it. So basically, resolve A before resolving B. If a card ability uses the word to, then the player will have to completely resolve the effect before the word to in order for them to resolve the effect that follows it. If a card ability uses the word and, then the player will have to resolve the effects that occur before the word and as completely as possible. There are also some card abilities that will specify that the player can only use said ability once per turn. In situations like this, the player is able to resolve said ability during the turn of another player, allowing it to be used once during that given turn, even if said player already used said ability on their own turn. So hypothetically speaking, if playing with 4 players, then according to the Living Rules reference, that card's ability can be resolved 4 times, once upon each player's turn. At least that's our understanding of the rule, but we would like to hear audience input on this. When it comes to the timing of a given ability and it uses the word after, then the ability's effect will be resolved immediately after the described timing effect. If the timing of an ability uses the word when, then the ability's effect will be resolved at the moment of the described timing event. And if an effect is connected with both the words when and after, then the when effect takes precedence over the after effect. If multiple abilities are to be resolved at the same time, then the current player is to determine the resolution order, with each ability being resolved once for every instance that it occurs in its timing event. Abilities are also unable to interrupt other abilities, so they're only able to be used before or after that of another ability gets resolved or on their own. If an ability is able to cancel a given result during combat, then it will cause the results to be ignored, so no damage is dealt and the dice aren't used to determine the combat winner. If an ability turns a result from one result to another, then the original result is to be ignored. So abilities that are able to modify the original result won't be able to be used on that given die. If an ability adds a hit to a given roll, then treat the roll as having an extra die with a hit result, with this result not being able to be re-rolled. If an ability is to be resolved at the start of combat, then it will have to be resolved before any player is to roll any dice. If an ability instructs the player to gain +X followed by an icon, then said player is to add the specified value to the matching value that is found upon their given character card or ship sheet. An example of this can be seen with an ability that says gain +X hyperdrive. This gives said player the specified value listed upon the card to their given hyperdrive value. If an ability instructs a player to exchange 2 contact tokens, then each of the affected contact tokens are to be moved from their current contact space and placed into the space of the other contact token. Each contact token also retains its orientation of being either face up or face down. Since these abilities are passive, they are always active as long as the player possesses them. There is also the possibility that they can be combined with similar abilities in order to increase their effects. But when the player found to the current player's left is rolling dice during combat for a contact, patrol, or an enemy found upon either a job or encounter card, then the current player can't use any of these given combat abilities. When it comes to all ties and timing conflicts that aren't specified within the rules, the current player is to determine the outcome. When engaging in a trade action, the current player will choose another player found in their space and exchange any number of cards with them. This includes bounties, cargo, crew, gear, jobs, and mods. And when performing a trade, it doesn't have to be equal as long as both players agree to it. But with that said, players can't trade secret or ship sheets. And if a contact token is found upon a given bounty card and the bounty card is traded, the contact token is traded alongside its respective bounty. And if there are multiple players found within the same space as the current player is able to trade with any of them. But with that said, the other players can only trade with the current player. Although there is a limit with the trading of cards, players can still exchange credits and debt tokens with one another at any time during their turn. Since this can be done anywhere upon the map, the players don't have to be in the same space as each other. It can even be done during the middle of a player action. It is even possible for players to trade credits for future promises, although these promises aren't binding. This means that the player can decide that, when the time comes, to not actually fulfill their promise. But what do you expect from a game filled with scum and villainy? With the trading of credits and debt tokens, they don't count as actions, which allows the trade to occur when they're not in the same space. But when engaging in the trade of credits and debt tokens, they have the possibility of interfering with an ability, encounter, or combat. With the market action, it is the main way players obtain bounties, cargo, gear, jobs, and mods. But with that said, this action can only be performed when a player is found upon a planet. When performing this action, the player can choose a market deck, followed by discarding the top card, which is placed face down at the bottom of the deck, followed by revealing the top card. This allows the player to cycle through the cards in order to find a card they want, or to deny their opponents the cards they wish to buy. But if playing with unfinished business, the player is allowed to discard a second card from the same market deck if they wish. Regardless if the player discards a market card or not, they can choose to buy one card from a top of any of the market decks. And once a player has bought a card, the top card of that given market deck is to be revealed. And if the revealed card has a patrol movement icon, don't resolve said icon if the card gets discarded. But if the card doesn't get discarded, then said patrol will have to be moved. With the patrol movement icon, it consists of a faction icon and a distance that said patrol is to be moved. So in order to resolve the patrol movement icon, the current player is to move the listed patrol token equal to the number of spaces indicated by the revealed card. Along this same vein, if an ability is to move either a player or patrol directly to a given space, then the given player or patrol is to be placed onto said space. When a player or patrol is moved in this manner, neither the player nor the patrol moves through the intervening spaces. If there is a reveal contact icon found upon the newly revealed card and the number of players found in the game is indicated by the range number, then they will have to reveal a face-down contact token found upon the player's planet face-up if it's possible for them to do so. And this is to occur when a card is flipped face-up after a player bought or gains a card from the market. Although this doesn't count as an encounter for said player, the player is able to encounter it during their given step. If the player is to flip a contact token that matches their given character, then they are to remove said token from the game and flip another one. And if the player isn't found at a planet that resolves the reveal contact icon, then the icon is to have no effect. With unfinished business, most of its market cards possess reveal contact icons. Found in the upper right corner of each market card is a credit cost, although some market cards come with a 0 credit cost. In order for a player to purchase a market card, they will just have to spend the listed credits, assuming they are able to afford it. When purchased, said market card is to be placed under the player's player board or ship sheet within the slot that matches the given card type, with each slot being able to only hold a single asset card. And if the player doesn't have an empty slot for that given card type, then said player has the option of discarding one of their cards in order to make room. There are some market cards that have a given trait found before the listed ability, such as illegal, weapon, or armor, printed in bold and can possess one or more traits. In situations like this, these traits are always capitalized. Although they don't have any inherent effect, they can be referenced by other abilities. With unfinished business, it provides new characters, equipment, ships, jobs, cargo, and crew, as well as a way to quickly travel across the galaxy. It also doubles the size of the encounter deck and introduces 2 variants to the game in the form of favors and ambitions. With the core world spaces, they share an encounter deck and they represent adventures a player will have while either visiting or passing through the core worlds. On the player's turn, if they choose to engage in an encounter on a core world space, then it will cause them to draw the top card of the core world's encounter deck and resolve it. But before drawing a core world's encounter card, the player will have to announce their intention to cross to the other side of the galaxy, and if they intend to cross, they are to resolve the across the core section of the core world's encounter card. But if the player doesn't intend to cross the galaxy, or they fail to announce their intention to cross, the player is to resolve the core world section of the encounter card instead. With the across the core section of the encounter card, it provides a means by which the players can directly move from one core world space to the other, assuming that they have fulfilled the listed requirements. When instructed to do so, the player is to move their standee to the other core world space. An icon is also found upon each core world space as a means of helping remind the players about this. When traveling from one core world to another, the player doesn't move through any of the other spaces found upon the map, and they ignore all patrols. And when it comes to resolving patrol movement, they can't cross through the core worlds unless a card effect allows it. When it comes to that of favors, it allows the players to help each other out in numerous ways, thus creating new avenues for negotiations and increasing player interaction. With implementation of favors, they won't significantly impact the length of the game. And even though the galaxy's outer rim is relentless and cutthroat, individuals can still be persuaded to help each other out as long as the price is right. With the obtaining of favors, it can be requested of any opponent, regardless if they're in the same space as the requesting player or not. And any player can request a favor at any time unless a dice roll was just made for combat or skill test purposes. And even though each player is able to ask for any number of favors, they can only obtain a single favor on their turn. With the types of favors that can be obtained, they consist of advice, combat strategy, endorsement, and shortcut. With advice, the player is to choose a skill during their turn to use for their next skill test. When asking for advice, the chosen skill will have to be found on the character or crew card that belongs to the player they're asking a favor from. With combat strategy, one additional die is to be rolled during combat that involves the player's character or ship. With endorsement, the player is to choose one of the factions that they wish to receive reputation from as long as the other player possesses positive reputation with said faction. From there, the player receiving the favor is to be treated as if they possess positive reputation with the chosen faction until the end of said player's turn. From there, we have shortcut, which will give the player a +1 hyperdrive until the end of the player's turn. If any of the players agree to grant a favor, then the requesting player is to obtain the associated effect. And if multiple players offer to grant the requesting player the given favor, then the requesting player is to choose which offer they wish to accept. Regarding favors, each player is to take their respective debt token during setup, which represents a promise of a future favor they owe to another player. Just like credits and assets, debt tokens can be traded in at any time during the game. And those that belong to other players, they're able to be traded like that of other assets. When claiming a debt token, it counts as the player receiving their one favor for said turn, with the player who receives the debt token having to grant the favor that is asked of them. And the player who possesses another player's debt token can return said debt token to the respective player in order to obtain a favor of their choice from said player. With the asking of a favor, the requesting player can entice others as an incentive for granting it. This can include things such as offering or trading assets, credits, and debt tokens with another player who is found within the same space as them. Future promises can also be offered, although any agreement that can't or isn't immediately fulfilled is non-binding. It is worth noting that players can't request favors from themselves. If you do it yourself, it's not much of a favor. Like George Carlin said about self-help, if you did it yourself, you didn't need help. And we agree with him about paying attention to the language that we all agree upon. Otherwise, it'll lead to nothing but needless confusion. Language is meant to help convey thoughts and ideas, not needlessly complicate things unless one is planning to perform unscrupulous acts. With all of that said, it's possible for players to give others credits as a means of disincentivizing them from giving a favor to another player. And be brazen about it. No one is trustworthy when playing, assuming that they're running with the game's theme. So why not be bold about screwing over your fellow players? But again, such agreements are non-binding, so the bribe can be accepted just to give the favor out to the other player anyway. With ambitions, it presents players with additional goals that they will have to accomplish in order to win the game, thus presenting them with a long-term strategic direction. Although this increases the length of the game, it provides a story arc to each player. It can be seen as providing a path for each player to cement their legacy as the most infamous individual within the Outer Rim. If playing with ambition, then the player will no longer win by just obtaining the prerequisite amount of fame. Instead, they will have to also complete a series of goals and requirements that are listed upon their given sheet. With the implementation of ambitions, each player is to be given their own ambition sheet, which possesses a number of parts. With the setup instructions, the credits and benefits the player is to receive occurs here, with the skills and other requirements needed to be completed also being summarized. If a sheet gives a player a market card, they indicate which market deck is to provide said card. Once searching the deck and finding said card, the respective deck is to be shuffled. The sheet also gives any additional abilities the player is able to use, along with the goal requirements that will have to be met in order for them to win. Each goal is also preceded by an element that indicates when the goal is able to be completed. Finally, with the progression tracker, it will have the goal tokens placed onto it within these spaces when each goal has been completed. With the goal elements, they consist of the following. With a dash, the goal can be completed at any time during the game. With a number, the goals will have to be completed in numerical order. With the infinity symbol, these represent an ongoing goal that are only completed once their criteria have been met. Although these goals can be completed at any time, they can't be completed if the criteria for the given goal is no longer met. And with the fame symbol, the final goal can only be completed after the player has obtained the amount of fame that is equal to or greater than the fame requirement, along with completing all of the other ambition goals. Once all of the standard steps have been completed, place the random assortment of ambition sheets that is equal to the number of players plus one face-up upon the table. From there, starting with the last player and proceeding in reverse turn order, each player is to choose one ambition sheet and place it next to their player board. After every player has selected their sheet, the remaining sheet is removed from the game. Some of these goals will provide the player with an encounter ability, which specifies how the goal is to be completed along with a possible destination. In this situation, the player will have to be at the specified destination in order to resolve the encounter ability. Some ambition sheets also provide an additional action the player can use during their turn. If said ability lists a destination, then said player can only use said action at that destination. If the encounter instructs the player to resolve a databank card, then said card will have to be resolved the same way as a job. And if the player is defeated while resolving the card, the encounter will fail, with the player having to try again on a future turn. But once the player completes the goal, then they're to place the goal token upon their ambition sheet in the progress tracker space for said goal. And if a goal requires the player to perform a task multiple times, then they're to place a goal token upon the respective progress tracker every time said task is performed. For the goal to be completed, it occurs once it reaches the needed number of tokens. The reason for this is to keep track of the goal's progress during the course of the game. If the player no longer meets the criteria for a goal that is in possession of an infinity symbol, then they're to remove the goal token from the goal's progress tracker space. And once the player has completed all of their ambition goals and meet the fame requirement, they win the game. Unfinished Business also enhances the single-player mode by providing the option to compete against that of bounty hunters, along with adding a special AI card for each character so that each opponent possesses their own challenge. During gameplay, there will always be one patrol for each given faction found upon the map. If a patrol gets destroyed because you know they suck, then said token is to be removed from the game with a new patrol being spawned connected with said faction. And though patrols will typically move when a player engages in a market action, there are some card abilities that will also instruct the patrol tokens to move as well. When this occurs, then simply follow the instructions found on said card. It's not that hard to understand. If multiple paths exist for a patrol to follow that will lead to the given player, then said player is able to choose which path the patrol is to follow, even if one of these paths constitutes as the shorter path. But with that said, if the patrol has the possibility of moving to the player's space, then it will have to move along the shortest available path in order to reach the current player. With that said, patrols are able to freely move into and through the space that possesses one or more players, other patrols, or the maelstrom, and to end their movement within any given space, even if it's a planet. With patrol movement, its default mode is clockwise around the map when moving towards the current player. However, if the player is found in a counterclockwise direction, then said patrol is to move as such. But if the direction to the current player is unclear from the patrol's perspective, then the current player is to decide what direction the patrol is going to take. The patrol is to continue in this direction until it reaches an intersecting point where it might reverse direction, but only if it will cause it to get closer to the current player. If a patrol ends its movement in a player's space, it will not result in combat. And if the patrol still has movement when it enters the current player's space, it will have to come to a stop, although it still won't result in combat. With the encounter step, the player can choose one of the following options to resolve: encounter a patrol, encounter your space, encounter a contact, and resolve an encounter ability. If the player possesses negative reputation with a given faction and their patrol is found in their space, then the decision is essentially made for them and the player will have to encounter said patrol. But if the player isn't forced to encounter a patrol, then they have the option of choosing which type they wish to encounter. With Encounter a Patrol, it consists of fighting a patrol token found in the player's space. Although the player will have to fight a patrol where they possess negative reputation with its faction, the player also has the possibility of fighting a patrol where they have neutral or positive reputation with its faction. With that said, if the player possesses either positive or neutral reputation with the patrol's faction, then the player has the option to either encounter said patrol or skip it. If multiple patrols are found within the same space and the player encounters a patrol, the process that was just described is to be done, but this time for multiple patrols being present instead of one. And if encountering a patrol, the player will choose which patrol they wish to encounter. Each patrol also possesses a ship combat value, which indicates how many dice it is to roll during combat. If the player loses the encounter, they are to move the patrol one space away in any direction they wish. But if they win, then they will lose one reputation with the patrol's faction, gain the reward that is listed upon the patrol token, and then remove the token from the game. Once removed, a new patrol token for said faction is to spawn. With the rewards gained, level 1 patrols give the player credits, while level 2 and level 3 patrols give the player fame. But with level 4 patrols, the player will get nothing but defeat. This is because level 4 patrols are invulnerable, as seen with a dash found in their given combat value section. Because of this, they will always deal enough damage to defeat the player with no dice rolls occurring. So basically speaking, combat can't be resolved against them. It is worth noting that when resolving the effects of combat, regardless of if the player wins or loses, it is done before the player determines if they've been defeated. If defeated, the player can still win combat and obtain the associated reward. When spawning a patrol, the top token from the faction's patrol token stack is to be drawn, followed by being placed face up in the adjacent space. And it is worth noting that there will always have to be one patrol token for each faction found upon a map. So when a patrol for a given faction gets eliminated, another patrol token for said faction is to spawn. With Encounter Your Space, an encounter card for the given location is to be drawn from atop of the given encounter deck, with each encounter card having up to 3 sections found on it, with some sections also being subdivided. The player is to determine which section matches their situation. They're to resolve the card, which includes reading it aloud, and then they discard the card face down to the bottom of its given encounter deck. Some encounter cards also possess a bounty, cargo, crew, job, gear, or mod that is listed upon the card's bottom with the card's effect, instructing the player to gain said asset. If this happens, the card is to be placed into the matching slot upon the player's board or ship sheet instead of discarding it. The player is to also tuck the card under their board or sheet to cover up the other sections of the given encounter card. There are also some encounter effects that are labeled as being secret that represent hidden abilities that the player is able to obtain. Cards with a secret are easy to identify since the word secret is clearly labeled on it, as well as being found upside down, which is done to reduce the chance that the players will accidentally share it. So when reading the secret, the player is to read it to themselves. But those that choose to be idiots are free to preemptively share the secret. Only when they're resolving it does it have to be read aloud. Each secret will describe when and how it is to be resolved, with some being bounties the player can obtain. With the resolving of the secret, it is done in the future by following the instructions found upon said card. These secrets are kept face down upon the table when the player is not looking at them and do not take up any slots. The card also can't be shared or shown to another player, and the player is able to look at their secret at any time. It is worth noting that some planets come with faction icons found upon them, with the associated encounter cards commonly allowing the player to either gain reputation with said faction or give a reward to the player who has positive reputation with them. The given encounter cards will provide an overview for the most common rewards that will appear on these cards, so the player should keep this in mind when choosing which type of encounter they want to resolve. With Encounter a Contact, it sees the player reveal and encounter a contact token found at their current planet and allows them to resolve a specific databank card. It also typically provides a crew member. What allows this to occur is the fact that each contact token has a number on its face that corresponds to one of the databank cards. In the base game, each planet comes with 2 contact tokens next to it at the start of the game, with these tokens considered to be found upon said planet. And if a player is on said planet, any contacts found there are also treated within said player's space. In order to encounter a contact, the player is to choose a contact token found at their current planet and flip it face up. and if there is more than one contact token at said planet, then the player is able to choose which token they wish to encounter. But once flipping a contact token, they will have to encounter it. After flipping the contact token face up, the player can choose to fight said contact or to resolve the databank card, with the player being able to look at the databank card before making this decision. If resolving the databank card, retrieve the appropriate card with the top section of said card being read and the ability being resolved. Depending upon the outcome, the card can become a crew member for said player. If gained as a crew member, then tuck the card in one of the crew slots so that only the crew portion of the given card is visible. But if the ability doesn't allow the player to keep the card, then return it to the databank deck. After resolving the databank card, the contact token is to remain face up upon the planet unless the databank card says to discard it or remove it from the game. If it doesn't say to discard or remove it, the token is to remain face up within its space. When face up, players can encounter the contact normally during their given encounter step. Some contacts come with faction or droid icons found upon them, and though these icons don't have any inherent effect, they can be referenced by other abilities. Each contact token also comes with a class, which is either that of gray, green, or yellow, with the base game, and orange with unfinished business. Although these classes have no effect, they're used for setup and bounty purposes. When contact tokens are found face up on the map, then any player is able to look at the corresponding databank card at any time. And if an ability allows for a player to secretly look at a contact token, then the player is able to look at the face-down token without revealing it to any other player. From there, the player is to place the token back upon its initial contact space, face down. With that said, the player can tell the other players about the information that is found upon the token, which can include lying about it. When it comes to that of the contact's corresponding databank card, the player isn't allowed to look at it. With the adding of new character cards and contact tokens to the game through unfinished business, there is the possibility that a player can encounter a contact token that will match their character. If this occurs, then the player is to immediately discard the contact token without resolving the databank card or to engage in a fight for the associated bounty. From there, the player is to resolve a different encounter found at the planet. This includes encountering the space itself or dealing with a different contact token if possible. When it comes to that of the orange contact tokens, they follow the same rules as all of the other contact tokens. So if a planet is without an orange contact token, including the core world spaces, then the planet is to be treated as an empty contact space for purposes of game effects that refer to such spaces. With a bounty, it is an objective that consists of either capturing or eliminating a specific contact with each bounty, possessing a name and portrait that matches a contact token. They are also treated as assets when it comes to that of game mechanics and are able to be obtained from market, encounter, and databank cards. When obtained, the bounty is to be placed into an empty bounty slot, with a bounty card being able to be discarded in order to create an empty slot for the acquisition of a new bounty. If a bounty gets discarded, then said card is to be returned to its respective deck. If a contact token was connected with the discarded bounty, then said token is to be placed face up upon a planet that has an empty contact token space found nearest to said player, ignoring the class designation. It is also worth noting that when a contact token is found upon a bounty card, it's not seen as being found in the player's space, and once completed, the bounty card is to be removed from the game. If a bounty has a cost of 0, then the player is able to obtain it for free and unable to be used for purposes of bartering. Each bounty also comes with a class that matches the class of its associated contact token. This is found upon the contact token's back, along with a number of colored pips. This information can be used to help the player find the given target. In order for a player to obtain a reward from a given bounty card, they are to find the specified contact and encounter the bounty character. From there, the player is to fight it in combat instead of resolving the contact's databank card. When fighting a contact, it occurs during the player's encounter step, which will interrupt the normal encounter or the resolution of an encounter ability. Like that of a contact and patrol encounter, bounties come with a combat value that indicates if the fight is going to be ground or ship combat, which is based upon combat icons that are printed upon said encounter. And if the player wins combat against the given bounty, then said player is to either eliminate or capture said bounty. With eliminating a bounty, the player is to gain the elimination reward connected with that bounty, followed by removing the card and contact token from the game. With capturing a bounty, the player is to place the contact token upon the bounty card with the obtaining of the capture reward, having the player resolve the deliver action at the bounty's indicated planet. After obtaining the capture reward, the bounty and contact token are to be removed from the game. Players are also able to deliver multiple bounties to a single destination as part of a single delivery action and deliver them in any order they wish. But if any effect occurs during delivery that results in the ending of the player's turn, then any remaining bounties that are yet to be turned in are unable to be delivered. If the player possesses a bounty that is connected with one of their own crew members, then the player is able to fight said crew member as their encounter ability. If they win the combat, then they're to discard the crew card, followed by either eliminating or capturing the crew member's corresponding contact token, having the contact token from the pool of discarded tokens placed onto the given bounty card. But if the player loses combat, then they are to discard their crew member and place the crew's contact token face up upon the closest planet that has an empty contact token space. During combat, the player will be unable to use the skills or abilities of said crew member. But what do you expect? They're not going to assist with their own downfall. If the current player possesses a bounty that is a crew member of another player and the two players are in the same space, then the current player is able to fight the crew member as their encounter with the player who possesses the crew member, having the option of protecting them. If they do, then the current player is to fight the other player instead. If protecting their crew member, the player will engage in ground combat if at a planet, or in space combat if at a nav point. If the defending player loses, then they're to discard said crew member with the current player either eliminating or capturing said crew member. But if not protecting their crew member, then the player found to the current player's left is to roll the dice for the crew member as if it was normal bounty combat. But if the current player loses combat, then the other player is to keep the crew member with no additional effects occurring. With the addition of new bounties to the game through unfinished business, there is the possibility that a player is able to obtain a bounty card that will match another player's character. Since contact tokens that are connected with characters that are in play are discarded, a player who draws a bounty card that is connected with another player's character will cause the given bounty to be unavailable to be completed by locating said contact token. Instead, the player with said bounty can choose to fight said character as their encounter if they are found within the same space. But unlike that of a contact bounty, the player doesn't have an option of either capturing or eliminating another player's character. If the player that possesses the bounty wins, then the bounty has been completed. But if they fail, then said player is to keep the bounty and can attempt to complete it again on a future turn. If a player wins the combat but is also defeated, they will either eliminate or capture the contact before being defeated. After gaining the reward from the bounty card is to be removed from the game instead of being discarded. But if the player loses the combat, they are to keep the bounty card with the contact token remaining upon the given planet. Players also can't complete a bounty against their own character due to the scum and villainy of the galaxy not wanting to turn themselves in because they value their freedom too much to ever do such a thing. But from gameplay purposes, it's antithetical for a player to complete their own bounty because it would be seen as preventing them from playing the game. With that said, the player is able to obtain their own character's bounty as a means of preventing the other players from completing it. Think of it as cock-blocking, but on a bounty hunter level. When completing a bounty for another player's character, the current player is to ignore the rewards and effects found upon the bounty card and perform the following steps instead. First, the current player is to gain 5,000 credits and 1 fame. Second, if the defending player possesses negative reputation with one or more factions, the current player will choose one of these factions and improve its reputation by 1. And third, if the defending player possesses positive reputation with one or more factions, the current player will choose one of these factions and reduce its reputation by 1. And finally, with Resolve and Encounter ability, some abilities are preceded by the word encounter, which is printed in bold. In this case, simply resolve the card's ability. And if an encounter ability requires the selection of another player by the current player, and there aren't any other players found within their given space, then said encounter ability can't be used. With all of that taken care of, let's take a look at the resolution of skill tests, combat, goals, and jobs. With skill tests, both characters and crew are trained in a variety of different skills, and they define the things that they are experienced in. With the player, they possess all of the skills that are listed upon their character and crew cards. Several tasks will put the player's given skills to the test to see if they successfully perform said task when instructed to do so. With the performance of a skill test, 2 dice are rolled with the player aiming for one of the results needed to pass. With that said, players can perform a skill test even if they don't possess the specific skill being tested. They're just less likely to succeed. With an unskilled roll, it occurs when the player lacks said skill, needing at least 1 crit to pass. With a skilled roll, it occurs when the player possesses said skill, needing at least 1 crit or 1 hit to pass. And with a highly skilled roll, it occurs when the player possesses the skill more than once, typically through the obtaining of crew members who share a given skill with the player and/or another crew member, needing at least 1 crit, 1 hit, or 1 focus to pass. If the player rolls anything other than the desired die result, they fail said test. When it comes to the parameters of a pass or fail, they're listed upon the card that initiated the test. But if a test only lists the effects for either a pass or fail, then the outcome for the missing effect is that nothing happens. With combat, it occurs when the player is instructed to do so or they encounter a patrol. And unless specifically allowed by a card, players can't attack each other. It also comes in two types, ground and ship, with said type determining the combat values, which then determines the number of dice rolled and if either the character or ship will sustain damage if hit. When instructed to engage in combat, it will specify if it's ground or ship. With ground combat, the player is to use their character's ground combat value along with their character's health value. With ship combat, the player is to use their ship's combat value along with their ship's hull value. When fighting a patrol, ship combat is always to be used. When fighting another player, ground combat is to be used when at a planet, or ship combat when at a nav point. When resolving combat, it is pretty straightforward. When the current player is resolving combat, they're known as the attacker and will roll attack dice that is equal to their combat value, totaling the amount of damage that they rolled. Every hit result delivers 1 damage, while every crit result delivers 2 damage. Although a focus result delivers no damage, it can be used by the abilities found on the cards. Once the damage value has been determined, the target of the attack, known as the defender, will go through the same process. From there, each player will take damage that is equal to the damage value rolled by the opposing player. With the resolution of abilities, which includes the re-rolling of dice, the attacker is to use them first, with the defender going next. With attack dice, the attacker will modify their roll first, followed by the defender modifying the attacker's dice. With the defense dice, the defender will modify their roll first, followed by the attacker modifying the defender's dice. With the application of damage tokens, they're taken from the supply, which is based upon the damage that is delivered, with any character damage being placed onto the character card, while any ship damage being placed onto the ship sheet. Once receiving damage equal to the character's health value or the ship's hull value, then it will see the player become defeated. And since neither the character or ship can sustain more damage than their respective values, any excess damage that either sustains will just be ignored. Once a player has been defeated, their character standee is to be placed onto its side within its current space. They lose 3,000 credits, and the player will discard all of their secrets. But if the player has less than 3,000 credits, then they're to lose whatever credits they possess. Once defeated, the player is to finish the step that they're currently performing, followed by skipping any actions or steps that they have not started to resolve. But if the player isn't defeated, then the respective value will equal the initial health or hull value minus any sustained damage. During the player's next planning step, they will have to choose to recover all damage or to use the planning ability. From there, the player is to stand their character standee back up upon the map. If an ability allows the player to recover damage before reaching the planning step, and it causes the player to no longer possess enough damage to be classified as defeated, then the player's character is to be stood back up upon the map. But while the player is defeated, they're unable to be attacked, and any other player who possesses a bounty for a crew member of the defeated player can fight said crew member with the defeated player unable to protect their crew member. When recovering from damage due to an ability, the player is to remove a number of damage tokens from either their character or ship equal to the damage listed by the ability. When recovering during the planning step, then the player is to remove all of the damage tokens found upon both their character card and ship sheet. And if a player has an ability that would prevent damage delivery, then the player is to reduce the damage that would be dealt to them by the listed amount. Once both sides have sustained damage, combat comes to an end. And if either player possesses an effect that requires a winner to be declared, then it is the player who rolled the most amount of damage. But if both players roll an equal amount of damage, then the attacker is deemed the winner. With combat made against a patrol or card, the player seated to the current player's left is to roll dice and make decisions for the defender. And since both enemy types lack health and hull values, they can't sustain damage. Instead, they possess effects based upon if they win or lose combat. And the effects associated with either winning or losing is dependent upon who the winner and loser is. With personal and ship goals, they describe how they are to be completed as well as what is to be done once completed. And each ability that is obtained from the flipping of a character card or ship sheet will describe how and when it is able to be resolved. With most goals, they require the player to perform a given task a certain number of times, which is tracked by goal tokens being placed upon the character card. And when flipped, all of the goal tokens get discarded. With the personal goal, each character possesses one found upon the front of their given character card, which gives one fame, followed by being flipped over when completed. When flipped, the goal is replaced with a new ability that the player is now able to use, similar to leveling up in an RPG. And with all ships that are bought during the game, they come with a ship goal and function just like a personal goal. When a ship's goal has been completed, the player will gain fame and flip the ship sheet over in order to gain a new ability along with a legendary name. And if a player makes progress toward the completion of a ship's goal prior to obtaining said ship, it will not count towards the completion of that ship's goal. The exception to this is if the player is still fulfilling the conditions for its completion. With jobs, some characters start the game with one which is obtained from the job market deck. Found above the name of each job is a list of skills that will be tested when the job is attempted. Some of these skills are printed in italics, indicating that a failure will likely result in the failure of said job. When obtaining crew, the player obtains a diverse skill set which makes job completion easier. When attempting a job, the player will have to be in the destination that is listed upon the card at the start of their given encounter step. For their given encounter, the player can follow the job instructions, which will typically include the resolution of a particular databank card. With the databank card, it will list what needs to be done in order to complete it and gain the associated reward. Start by reading the card aloud, beginning with step 1 and stopping when the player is required to perform a test or engage in combat. After resolving a step, the player is to move to the next step unless they're instructed to do otherwise. If the player is defeated, then they have failed the job with the player's turn coming to an end and not resolving any more steps. Although the player is to keep the job card for purposes of future attempts, they're to return the databank card. And if an ability reads, "The job fails," then the resolution of said job is to come to an end with the databank card being discarded. And if there are multiple copies of said databank card, it should be shuffled with the others of the same number before being placed back into the databank deck. When a job has been completed, the databank card is returned to the deck and the player will gain the specified reward. The reward will also instruct the player to either discard the job or to remove it from the game. When an encounter, marker, or AI card gets discarded, it is to be placed face down at the bottom of its respective deck. Some effects will also remove cards or tokens from the game. If this occurs, then return the card or token back to the game box. There are also jobs that require the player to engage in combat against an enemy found on the databank card. If they lose during combat, the player fails the job, while if they succeed, they continue the resolution process. And if the player wins the combat encounter but ends up being defeated, they're still to gain the rewards listed for winning combat before they are to resolve the effects for being defeated. But if a player ends up getting defeated before completing a job, then the job is to automatically fail. But the player is to keep the job so that they can resolve it in a future turn. The databank card can also specify other instructions that are based upon if the player wins or loses combat. There are also some jobs found in unfinished business that require 2 players working together to complete it. When a player possesses one of these jobs, they have to be found at the specified destination alongside another player. But if this isn't possible, then the current player is unable to perform the job. While completing the job, if a decision has to be made, then the current player will make said decision unless otherwise stated. And if any player that is involved in the job gets defeated during the performance of said job, then said job fails. There are also some jobs from unfinished business that will allow the player to attempt to take credits or assets from another player. With these jobs, each lists a skill as opposed upon their given skill list. This indicates that both players will have to test this skill during the course of performing the job. The best possible outcome for the player performing this job is for them to pass said test while their opponent fails. If the active player gets defeated during an encounter ability that is found upon the wanted job card, but they also manage to win combat, the player does complete the associated job along with claiming the reward for winning combat. This supersedes the rule regarding a job failure when the active player is defeated. Before ending this episode, there are a few more rules we'd like to look at. When a player gains broken arm, encrypted message, priority delivery, or structural damage, and they don't have an empty slot of the appropriate type, then said player is to discard a card found in an appropriate slot in order to create an empty slot for one of these aforementioned cards. With Cad Bane's ability of gain 1 additional fame, it will not reduce the listed fame. And if an ability reads, "You have X additional fame," then said fame is to not be affected by Cad's ability. But if an effect will reduce the rewards of a given bounty, job, or cargo to that of 0, it will not affect the credits that Cad will gain from his given ability, If Dengar receives the IQA-11 Blaster Rifle gear card, then Dengar's ability will reduce the damage that is dealt first. From there, if the delivered damage is greater than that of 2, the total is to be reduced to that of 2 by the Blaster Rifle's ability. With Hondo Onika, when goal tokens are placed onto his assets, they are to remain on their respective cards, even if Hondo gets flipped to the front side of his character card. With Lando Calrissian, when resolving his encounter card, the player is able to re-roll their die using Lando's crew ability. If the player rolls a blank during the encounter, and Lando is the player's only crew member, then the player will have to discard Lando. Sounds like a good reason to 1. Not roll a blank, and 2. Get another crew member as insurance against a blank roll. When it comes to that of personal goals, if the card doesn't explicitly say, complete this job, then it will not count towards the completion of Dr. Afra's personal goal. Some characters and crew members also come with a droid icon printed upon their card. Although this doesn't have any inherent effect, it can be referred to by certain abilities. For questions pertaining to specific cards, turn to the Living Rules reference document, version 1.1, as well as the errata.
If you like this episode, feel free to give it a like. And if you want to stay up to date on any future episodes we upload, go ahead and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/checkpointgaming. See you in the next episode, and happy gaming.